Hello, everyone. This is Kwabi. Welcome to another episode of 50 Shades of Over 50. And I have a fabulous guest with me today. Her name is TJ Bryan. Welcome.
Thank you. I'm happy to be with you today.
And what's interesting is I actually interviewed TJ Bryan in 2015. And I didn't quite, because my platform was different, I didn't actually air the interview. So I'm so glad that I circled back to her and she accepted my invitation. And you're going to hear her story. It's really inspiring. So I'm excited, for this discussion. So my first question that I ask all my guests is, how old are you? So how old are you?
I am 77 and a half years old.
Love
And I'm
that.
taking credit for all of my every
Yes,
month of my life.
I agree. Totally. I agree. So tell us a little bit, because I know you're a runner. Our listeners don't know that, but tell us a little bit about what you did before you got into running.
Oh, I'd be happy to do so. I am a retired professor and retired chancellor of a university. And I think my progress to that point is a miracle of sorts. I am the child of two parents, neither of whom graduated from high school.
Wow.
I was born in a rural area in Maryland. I'm also the granddaughter of a sharecropper. I don't know if your audience
Yeah.
knows what that kind of person is. It's somebody who works in a farm and he doesn't own the farm.
No.
And he has no money because whatever you spend, you put back in it. So it's a life of struggle and a life of poverty. So that's my background. My parents decided when I was 13 years old that they were going to move from a rural farming area to Baltimore, a city that had colleges and universities. And if we had not made that move, I would not have gone to college. This was
Wow.
a period in US history, actually began in the early 1900s and continued up until about the 1970s. And this was a period called the Great Migration, when a lot
Mm.
of people, especially African Americans and others, were moving from areas that had little employment to cities where they thought they could um, find, cities of gold or
Yeah.
whatever.
Right. Yeah.
But at any rate, but that move made it possible for me to go to college. And so I did. I was the first person in my family to earn a bachelor's degree, the first person to earn a master's degree, and the first person to earn a doctoral degree. So I um, devoted most of my life to upward mobility because
Mm.
during my childhood, we were taught that if you worked hard and if you earned an education, the future could be yours. And I
Yes.
believed it. And so
Wow.
I worked really hard up through the ranks in education and higher education, and also became an administrator. And as I indicated before, I became a chancellor. And
Yeah.
along the way, I married. I robbed the cradle. I'm 77 and a half. My husband is 75. And so I've been married for 43 years to
Wow.
a wonderful man who is I should also he's a retired professor of mathematics and
Oh,
computer science,
wow.
but he's also my personal trainer.
Oh, nice.
I'm his only client, and the rates are great. I don't have to pay him.
Well, a very good, valuable client too. Look at your records, what you've done. You've done quite your achievements speak for themselves. So he's a good
I have
trainer.
we have one son
Mhm.
who is unmarried, much to my regret. My New Year's resolution is I'm going to stop nagging him about getting married and making me a grandmother. Whenever I say this to people, people tell me, well, my son didn't get married until he was like, whatever. And I said, well, thank you for keeping hope alive
I know, right?
for me. So
Oh, goodness.
it's interesting because after I was no longer working, as I said, I was
Mm.
really I was very intent on success
Mhm.
and really devoted my life to work. People would call me a workaholic, but I didn't see
Mm.
it that way. I love
You
working.
enjoyed it.
I
Yes.
enjoyed it, and I was able to help a lot of students. And so for me, devoting my time and my life in that way was worthwhile.
Yeah.
But, but when I was no longer working,
Mm.
my husband and I returned to Maryland at the time when I was no longer working. I was in
Yeah.
North Carolina. We moved
Mhm.
back to Maryland. And I realized I didn't know that many people in Maryland anymore. I'd been gone for
Mm.
a while. And I decided that I was going to, don't ask me why. This is like, this makes no sense. I decided impulsively that I was going to become a runner.
Okay,
Mind
can I
you,
just ask a quick question there?
yeah,
Were you an athlete before?
no.
Okay. I like
I
that.
was
Okay,
I
good.
was never an athlete. I
Okay.
was in school. I was always the last person picked for every team. It didn't matter what sport. We would play baseball in physical education class, for example. I'd be placed in the outfield because everybody knew I couldn't catch. I couldn't run. I couldn't swim. I couldn't play volleyball. I couldn't play basketball. And I had really low self-esteem in terms of my athletic ability. I mean, when you're not
Mm.
chosen for stuff all your life,
Yeah.
then you don't feel good about pursuing anything in that direction.
Yeah.
And I had no athletic ability, but I've always been determined. So I, but I, and my husband had tried to encourage me to run. My husband has been running for about 45 years. He used to be a smoker,
Yeah.
and
Mhm.
he's stopped smoking. I
Mhm.
used to make a lot of tacky remarks about his cough, and and he stopped smoking and he started running. And he,
Interesting.
yes,
Wow.
and it took him a couple of tries, um, because I've never smoked, but I understand from people who have that it's a difficult, very difficult habit to
Yeah, I've
break.
heard too. Yeah.
So anyway, he finally started running and he encouraged me to run with him. And I went with him one time and I decided I didn't like it. So I never went again.
Yeah.
And so I used to do aerobics for a little while. This was
Yeah.
during the 80s. You probably weren't
Mhm.
born
Oh.
then, but but,
I remember
but
that. The Jane Fonda
yeah, and
time
I
with
used
the
to
leg
do,
warmers.
oh yes, I had my little leg warmers, I had my little thong, the little thong over your tights.
Leotard and
And
everything. Yeah.
I had my leotard. And what's funny about aerobics was I was so self-conscious, and I went into the aerobics class. I was self-conscious about having on the leotard. I wore panties under the leotard and it looked terrible at any rate. And I remember I was in the class for maybe about 15 minutes and I was, I was breathless. I was out of, I thought, I said, I'm not going to leave though. So
And you stayed.
but yeah, but that was my only foray into, I guess, athletics.
Athletics. Right.
But, but I didn't have time for that because I was, really busy with my
Yeah.
career. So I sort of gave that up. But after I retired, at first when I retired, I spent a lot of time volunteering.
Okay.
I volunteered for organizations that benefited women and children.
Mm.
And so I also, after I retired, learned how to play piano. That's something I'd always wanted to
Love
do.
it. Yay.
And then decided, well, this is okay, but I want to do something else. I wanted
Mm.
to be fit.
Okay.
And it's because that had not been a concern of mine earlier in my life, fitness. I mean, I hadn't thought about it.
Yeah.
And so I decided I was going to try to learn how to run. And I saw a newspaper article about a half marathon training program.
Hmm.
Mind you, I couldn't walk from, I couldn't run a block, much less run a half. I didn't even know what a half marathon was. And I had no idea. I mean, 13.1
One.
miles. And so I had no idea what I was
Well,
getting
that was
into. So I signed up for this program, and you could do one session free of charge. So this is some running store that was sponsoring this program. So
yeah.
I went, and when I got there, it was on the program. It was the session was on a university campus
Okay.
in on Baltimore County, Maryland.
Yeah.
I got to campus. I'd never been to the campus. I got lost. And so I couldn't find wherever they were. And I saw
Yeah.
this woman, and she was there too. And she told me that the group couldn't use the track that day. So they were running around the campus. They were going to
Oh.
run 6 miles and then come back to that spot. And I'm thinking, 6 miles? I can't even run in my car.
I know that feeling.
So at any rate, I came back, even though I had no real reason to come back because I was awful. But I remember we would run around the track, but I walked around the track because I couldn't run. It took me weeks before I could run around the track one time. So
Wow.
but I persevered.
Yeah.
And I met some people, no people who became lifelong friends or anything like that, but I did meet some people, and I had something else to focus on. So that was the beginning of a new life for me.
Wow. And then now you're doing the Boston Marathon, like the most prestigious marathon in the world. Like, so, I mean, once you got into that, I guess it was just your thing. You were just doing it regularly, and you built up the endurance.
And it was about building up endurance. So often when people start running, they don't like it because they say, I can't breathe. But the ability to breathe more easily comes as you put in the time and effort.
Yeah.
And sometimes when people, when I talk to people, older people or younger people about running, they seem to think that's sort of just my only thing, in terms of fitness. But what I try to do, and I try to do this with my son, who says he doesn't like to run, even though he's a good runner. But I try to encourage people to be as fit as they can be. And that doesn't mean they have to run.
True.
They can walk. There's one of my neighbors I see, she walks every day. And actually, there are a couple of them. In my community, there are a lot of people who walk a lot. And they're not younger people like moi.
Yeah.
But they walk their dogs, but they just walk for exercise.
Yeah.
But I try to suggest to people, I'm not saying, even my book, Saving Myself One Step at a Time, I try to make it clear that you can walk, you can run, you can do whatever. I told my husband, I said, I love being outdoors too. That's part of my motivation.
Yeah, okay.
I told my husband, I said, when I can't walk, you're gonna have to take me out there and put me in something like an adult stroller and push me around. And the interesting thing for me is that I never spent any time outdoors until after I became older.
Wow. So interesting. I mean, I love this because there are people probably listening that, I can't do that. I'm too old to do that. I mean, you didn't start running till, how old were you when you started running?
I was 64.
The first time you started running?
The first time I started running, I was 64 years old. And I never thought about my age, even though after a while I began to notice I was the oldest person in almost every running group. But there are old people like me in the Boston Marathon. There are not a lot of us, but there are some of us.
Yeah.
Because the pace of your running is a function of your age. So I'm not expected to run as fast as somebody who is like 24, certainly not. But I said, my life is just it's like it's like I have two lives. My life before I was 64 and
Mm.
my life after I was 64.
Wow.
And um and I'm not extraordinary. I mean, I'm an ordinary woman who decided she was going to do something. I've been fortunate. Uh, I've had injuries, certainly, but I've been fortunate
Mm.
that I haven't had debilitating conditions. But even if I had debilitating conditions, there are things I can do. People can do, because I look online at like the chair exercises,
Yeah.
and weight training is something I do
Yeah.
3 days a week.
Mm-hmm.
And when I broke my foot a couple of
Yeah.
years ago, I couldn't do anything standing up. Everything I did was seated. And so I would do, those little, I don't know, those little things you do with,
Oh yeah.
slapping them. I
Yeah.
could do those things sitting. I could do we have a Bowflex machine.
Yeah.
And so a lot of those exercises are done seated. So I
Yeah.
could um, uh, improve my muscle mass,
Yeah.
and do a lot of things that actually should prolong my life.
I Yeah, I definitely agree with that because my mother-in-law, until she passed away, she couldn't walk, but she would do all the different exercises sitting down because she was very fit and active prior.
Mhm.
And then as she got older, she wasn't able to walk as well, and her balance,
Right.
she wasn't able to balance and walk by herself. And so she would do exercises sitting down. So it is possible for those of you listening and thinking, well, I'm like, you can find a way. There are options out there that can allow you to do some kind of movement without you having to run or be on your feet.
Yeah.
So,
And for those of us who are at least in terms of the numbers
mhm.
increasing in age, um, and there, we don't have to accept that we're limited. I
Yes.
mean, there are, and I go to, and I've had some, as that I broke my foot, not paying attention. I'm running and not paying attention, tripped over a sidewalk. And
Oh,
then I've had plantar fasciitis probably
mm.
3 or 4 times, which is an inflammation of the bottom of the foot.
Yeah, yeah,
I also broke a toe. I didn't know that breaking a toe is pretty common among runners because you're pushing off. I broke a toe, but every time, I mean, I could have said, well, I'm done. But I won't say that. I mean, I fight back.
yeah,
And I don't know
yeah,
if fights, but I don't, I mean, I just say I'm gonna, I'll just start over.
yeah. And you
And I
figured it
have
out.
yeah, and I go to physical therapy. I do whatever I need to do.
Yeah,
And I have started over as a runner 4 or 5 times,
yeah.
which means that I did not run for a long time, and I had to rebuild my endurance and my speed. And as I said, I've done it about 4 or 5 times. And I
Wow.
just, you know, but I just keep coming back because I love it. And it's the fitness I mentioned, but also too, I run alone now
Mm.
because I live in a rural, not rural, but I live in a, yeah, I guess you could sort of say it's suburban. It's like urban. It's not suburban. I think I may get a rural tax credit of some kind. And but running is a time when I'm running alone. It's a time for reflection. I think about
Yes.
things. And my husband laughed at me yesterday. He said right before you went out, you couldn't remember uh, uh, Jean's husband's name. And he said, you came right back in here and told me his name was Bruce. I said, that's because I ran, because
Yes.
running uh, helps me intellectually. I mean,
Yes.
physical activity um, heightens my intellectual capability.
Yeah.
And so when I'm like a word puzzle addict. And
Mhm.
so I do, what do? I do spelling bee in the New York Times. And
Oh,
so,
wow.
you have like how many, you get 7 letters and and you have to come up with all these words.
Yeah.
And so, but what I do is I come up with a lot of words while I'm running and I don't forget them. I'm thinking, how can I remember this? How can I remember these words? So I'll repeat them to myself a couple of times. There was one time when I used to take my phone with me, so I would type in the words on my phone
Right.
so I would forget them. But I don't do that anymore. But
Yeah.
and the interesting thing is when I started as a runner, I actually started because I wanted to be around people and
Mm,
to make friends.
I
And I
love
ran
this
with
thing.
people until I had no option because,
Yeah.
we moved and there was nobody around here to run with. And I tried to run with my husband, and you wives, you will understand this. He would say things, I would talk with him. He would say things like, you'd make a better use of your energy by keeping quiet and running. He didn't want to talk to me. It's so annoying. And then he would say things to me like, you should be on that side of the road, or you should do this and you should do that. So in the interest of marital harmony,
For sure. I understand that.
I don't run with him anymore. And one of my neighbors actually asked me, he says, I'm curious. He says, why don't you run with your husband? And I just said, oh, I said, I'm not ready when he leaves. And
Mhm.
also that was another thing. I wouldn't be ready. And so, and that would be another cause for annoyance. And later on, it's interesting. He was a much faster runner than I was. But then what's happened is I became a faster runner than he.
Really? Wow.
He said it was because I was newer at running, and he had been running
Oh,
for over
over
40 years.
time.
And so
Yes.
he said that usually when you start running, you have about 10 years in which you get better, and then you start, I guess, to plateau and then become
Interesting.
like him, slower.
Wow. I had no idea.
Yeah,
Interesting.
yeah. Anyway, so but it's
Love that.
yeah,
Tell us about your book. Like, why did you just, you have two books, right? Tell us about
I
your
do
books.
have two books. I have the first book was Saving Myself. Gee, can you see that?
Yeah, I can
Saving
see that.
myself
Hmm.
uh one step at a time. It's a running memoir.
Mm,
I decided that actually what happened is I was writing a memoir, and I sent it to an editor, and she said, there's so much in this book about running. Maybe you should write a book about running. And so I did.
mm,
And um, from that other book came the book about running, and I added to it. And um, actually, when I did it, some things had happened to me that I
mm.
didn't have in the initial text that I sent to the editor. And so
Yeah.
that was the reason. But also, I wanted to share the joy that running has brought to me.
Yeah.
And also, too, I came to running after a trying time in my life. And writing the book was cathartic.
Mm,
Also, what I learned is a lot of the books about running that I'd read, a lot of them were not written by women. And
mm,
I hadn't read any that really sort of shared the nitty gritty
mm.
in terms of running. And the
Yeah.
books about running had typically been by people who were, I guess, extraordinary athletes. Again, I'm just an
Yeah.
ordinary person.
I love that. I mean, I'm just fascinated by the fact that you didn't do any, you were not involved in athletics at all. And at 64, you started running. And so I know some people are listening to this, like, you know what, that could be me. And why not? That could be you.
Yeah, and you have to decide why you're running. I
Mhm.
mean, a lot of people run. Look, my primary care physician was telling me the other day, she's a runner, but she
Mhm.
said she wasn't able to run anymore because she just didn't have the time. I
Mm,
have the time now. And I told her, I said, well, maybe after you retire, you can return to running. And
mm.
she said that she loved running because she loved being part of the running community.
Oh,
You meet
okay.
some great people. I
Nice.
mean, really great human beings. I mean, it's like the world in general. I think that people in general are great human beings.
Yes.
And so, but the running community is so welcoming. I ran a half marathon. Let's see. Oh, I think it was the day after Thanksgiving. It was my
Mhm.
first race, because of COVID, all the races were
Yeah.
canceled and
Yeah.
whatever. So um, actually I ran a marathon in September and a half marathon in November.
November. Wow.
And when I was about close to the turnaround mark for the half marathon in November, there was a water stop that was staffed by people in a running group uh,
Oh.
I used to run with them on Saturdays when I lived in the Baltimore area.
Oh, wow.
And so I went by and they were going, "Yay, TJ." And people think, "Oh, I mean, you're making all this noise." And then when I made the turnaround and came back, they knew I would be coming. And so the noise was even louder. And I was actually
Oh.
embarrassed almost because they were so rowdy. But you meet people that you really sort of know a lifetime.
Yeah.
I still socialize with them, or I will once people are socializing more. People are
Yeah.
socializing more
Yeah.
now,
Yeah.
but many of my social activities were tied to
Running
uh, people, who
in that
invited me to
community.
things because I met
Oh,
them while I was running. But
oh,
you have
I
friends for a lifetime,
wow.
and the energy of going to races, and that's what my primary care physician mentioned.
Yeah.
She said, "I just love being at the races, like
Yeah.
as a spectator, as a runner,
Runner.
a
Yeah.
volunteer." And
Yeah.
so it's a great kind of experience in a great world.
Yeah, I love that. I miss running. I don't run anymore. My knees just were hurting too much, so I stopped. But I definitely remember like when you're running in the races and then people are cheering for you. People are cheering for you even if they don't know you. It's just a
Of course
wonderful
not.
feeling.
Yeah.
I mean, I love that. That was
Yeah.
just so great. So what's your next race?
My next race is actually the Boston Marathon. Uh, I qualified again, and as you indicated, it's the most prestigious
Oh
road
yeah.
race in the world because you have to qualify to participate,
Yeah.
and the qualifying times are a function of your age.
Yeah.
So that's a great thing about aging. We call it aging up. You just love to age up because it means that you don't have to run quite as fast in order to
But it's
qualify
still
for
it's still
Boston.
not easy though, even then.
Oh no, 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 because very few people qualify. I
Yeah.
was I was looking at actually I was looking at an article yesterday about the races that in which you have the probably the greatest likelihood of qualifying. And
Mhm.
so a lot of runners know what these races are, so they go to them because they think they will qualify. And if 20% maybe of the runners might or whatever, but a relatively small percentage of runners qualify. And
Yeah.
it is the sort of the golden ring or whatever you call
Oh
it. That's
yeah.
what they're shooting for. And I should say too, you were talking about your knees. I do a lot of things to prevent problems with running. Like, for
Yeah.
example, I had a knee issue, but what I did is I learned I have to strengthen the muscles around my knees.
Ah.
And for me too, when I have a knee issue, it's usually a sign that I need new shoes. So, but there are a number of things that you can do if you have like issues in order
Yeah.
to uh, run. And
Yeah.
again, if your remedies or your time your physical therapist doesn't yield what you want, you can always walk. Or
Yeah.
somebody said
That's what
to
I do
me,
now. It's like I walk and I'm actually trying to get into walking, like fast walking to do races where they're fast
yeah,
walking.
yeah,
So
yeah. And people tell me, TJ, you can always bike. And I said, I have a problem sitting down when I'm doing things. I have to be standing up. And so I shouldn't admit this to, I even stand up eating sometimes, not dinner, because that's sort of secret that my husband and I sit down and have dinner together every night. But it's not uncommon for in the morning for me to
you
be
to stand.
standing up eating because that's not a sacred time for us to be together sitting down. He'll be sitting at the table and I'll be standing at the island because I don't, I like standing up. But I'm digressing. But in
Yeah.
terms of the book, the nitty gritty is people don't know about some of the issues that women go through when they run.
Yeah.
Men, not so much, like pelvic floor issue.
Mm.
a lot of times people think that women have pelvic floor issues because of having, kids, or like
Kids,
kids, but
right?
you
Yeah.
also develop pelvic floor issues because of running, because you're pounding, and
Amen.
your
Yeah.
pelvic floor has to work hard
Oh,
in order to keep things. So that has caused problems. I go to physical therapy for that because I have pelvic floor dysfunction. It's just
mm,
too tight. And
yeah.
so I have experienced a lot of pain. I also have experienced some like nerve issues, and I have to fight for myself because
Yeah.
I went to my
Yeah, we always have
GYN
to do that. I'm glad you're bringing that up. We have to, as
in the
women.
medical stuff, and then I have to fight for myself. I get blown off because I'm
Yes.
telling people I'm running and I'm having this awful pain, and it doesn't. And so, and oh, that's like, well, I guess you should stop running. And I'm thinking, but I shouldn't. There ought to be some way that you can. So it took me 3.5 years
Wow.
of I read of pressing, because I'm not going to get,
Yeah, you weren't
you're
gonna
not
give
going to
up.
blow me
Yeah.
off. You're going to treat me seriously.
Yeah.
And the physicians I saw were women. And finally, I was referred to a physician a man, uh, and and he deals with, his specialty is non-invasive surgery, or
Oh, okay.
it's
Yeah.
surgery.
Hmm.
And so he says, he says, you don't need surgery. He said, but I need to find out. And so he identified a nerve problem I had. He also had no problem, the pelvic floor. He prescribed what he would prescribe for somebody who was having menstrual cramps, because
Mm,
the symptoms were the same.
wow.
And so he prescribed naproxen,
Hmm.
500 milligrams.
Yeah.
He's going to give me, for the nerve issue he identified, I'm getting a pain block. He
Yeah.
says,
Hmm.
"Oh," he says, Botox. It's the same stuff you put in your face. You put the same stuff you people put in their faces, but so it's like a muscle
Wow.
relaxant. So
Yeah.
I'm getting
Hmm.
Botox in that area, and so but I had to fight
But you know
because
what?
I kept getting
I,
blown off.
I know. And it's so sad because women, especially with menopause, I've heard a lot of women say that they come with their different symptoms and
Mhm.
and a lot of physicians will tell them, oh, you know what, it will pass. You don't want to hear that.
Right.
And to be honest with you, there are solutions. So you saying, oh, you get over it, it's not what a woman wants to hear. And so we have to be our own health advocates. We have to advocate for ourselves because no one is going to do that. And I'm glad you did that. But it took 3 years. Like
I
really,
did.
like that
Of
shouldn't
being
be.
blown off, as I said, and unfortunately by women, I guess the people, the GYNs, they're just dealing with they have people having babies and whatever. They don't want to deal with some woman who's running and she doesn't even have to run.
Right.
You understand? And
Yeah.
so
Yeah.
but also, another issue I present in the book is incontinence.
Yes.
I mean, I don't want to, I kept tinkling. I'm just like, why
Yeah.
am I tinkling on myself all the time? I
Yeah.
mean, I have control over it, but then I have to
Yeah.
stop and hop behind a bush.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um,
Yeah. It happens as we get
and
older.
it wasn't like I couldn't control it, but the fact that I had to keep stopping.
Right.
And I did not know that that increased more when it's cold, because your body
Oh,
doesn't have,
really?
yeah,
Interesting.
because apparently you're not, I noticed myself that if it's hot, it doesn't happen to me as often because my body is
Mm,
able to get rid of water through
right. That's true.
perspiration. And
That's true.
so when it's cold, I
Cold.
don't
It
have
doesn't
that,
have it.
whatever.
Yeah.
And somebody says, well, you can just focus on something else. I'm thinking, how can I, you don't,
There
just
are so
focus on
many
something.
solutions for that right now. That should not be the option.
And
Like
you shouldn't
really.
have to, you don't have to, just if you don't think about it, then you won't have to stop. I'm thinking, yeah, right, but how can I run and I'm
And
feeling
not
all
think
this
about it.
and not think about it? So, but I'm also too, I like nitty gritty. I put things in the book about like how,
Yeah.
what is it, the trots when you're out there running and you think, oh my God, I gotta go, and I gotta go. When do these people go away? I can find some place to hide. There's no restroom near here. so I mean, those are kind of things. I mean, I
Love
put in
it.
the glories of running and the
Yeah.
fun, but I also put in some truths. I
Yeah.
mean, I include truths that you will typically find in a book, uh, in most running books, but you'll find those truths in a running book written by an ordinary woman.
I love that. So something else before we wrap up that I want to ask you about is for you, as you got older, like how did you embrace that? Was that a struggle for you? Like, what was your take on it? What's your take on that for you personally?
I never thought about how old I was
Hmm.
because I don't feel old. I mean, I'm planning, I'm planning to, I hope to go on and on for as long as I can, and I'm certainly doing everything within my power to make sure that I
Love it.
am able to do the things that I love.
I love that.
Those things, I mean, doing what I love and enjoying life, that's something that I control. Well, to a degree, to an extent.
Yeah.
I mean, I
Yeah.
realize I don't, but I mean,
Yeah.
I can control much of that. And what I've learned, I think, most too, is to move on and leave. I used to spend time worrying about things, worrying about this and worrying about that. And my son would say to me, he said, Mom, he said, um, can you change it? He says, it's over. You can't change it. You know, he would say, you can do things differently based on what's happened in the past, but you can't change the past. It's over. And that was wise because I used to spend a lot of time worrying about things that were over,
Mm,
that were done,
that had
and about,
happened. Mm,
and well, I wish I could, if I would have done this or whatever. And all I can do is if I'm in that situation again, is to respond differently, try
yeah.
to learn from that experience. But I think that I enjoy life. I'm fortunate. I have a great husband.
Mm,
And if I didn't, I
love
have friends. I don't have any grandchildren, but I have a neighbor who's willing to pretend he's my grandson.
it. I
And
love it.
I have sort of, I met him, I've lived here for 7 years. So he was 4 or 5 when I met him and he was afraid. You know,
Oh,
he's like, he was with his parents, but he and his mother is 45. She and I go to lunch once a month.
yeah.
People
Oh,
say, I said, I go to lunch with one of my neighbors once a month. And a friend of mine said, well, how old is she? She probably thought she was my age. And I said, well, she's 45. And so, but I don't feel old when I'm with her, and she doesn't
no.
feel old with me.
Actually, I think intergenerational friendships are important. Like, really,
Yeah. Oh,
they are.
I have, and I, it would be so easy for me to stay at home and to be isolated because that's a concern. A lot of older people isolate themselves. I force myself. If people don't invite me to lunch, I ask them to meet for lunch. I mean,
Right.
I'm on a schedule, not really, but I go to lunch with people usually at least twice a month, sometimes even more. And I
Nice.
frequently initiate those lunches because um, some of my friends are still working and
Mhm.
some of them aren't going to be, and I like them. I always make sure that I spend time with people I like because there are some people I don't want to be around.
Mhm. Yeah, true.
And so, and I'm conscious of that. And I say, well, I don't, I'm not desperate enough to invite them to lunch. So I go but I'm conscious of what I need to do
Yeah, you're very
to
intentional
keep
about doing
to
that, and I
to
like
to
that.
to enjoy my life. I have a wonderful spouse, and I'll be honest, my sex life isn't. He's not here, but it's not what it used to be. But hey, I'm happy. He's happy,
Yes.
and I realize, and we spend a lot of time touching,
Yeah.
and so I ask him at times. I said, "Do you feel that you? I mean, you can't move in this bed without me being there." But he likes it. What it was, the spooning,
Yes,
spooning. I
spooning.
think spooning. So we're into spooning, heavy
Spooning
duty.
stage.
Yes, we spoon all the time. And then I think, and I'm so attuned to whatever, and I don't. I'm sure that, and I think you can teach your spouse to be, what you want him to
Of
be,
course. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
because what I, I I mean, I like touching. So he touches me all the time. He kisses me all the time. And
Oh,
I'm like little Pavlov's, whatever, because it's like
Pavlov's dogs.
always, I'm like always, because I'm always anticipating. And he's thinking, he's probably thinking, I'm just walking by her. And she's ready. She's like in a pooch with a smooch pose, smooch pose. So, but
Oh,
there's things that I sort of do. And if I did not have uh, a spouse, there are other things I could do. I love reading. I love writing.
mhm.
I love running. I like
Yeah.
walking. There are lots of things I could do to fill my time. I mean, life is a blessing.
Yeah, I mean, and that's so true. And for those listening, I know, I mean, this is a great way for us to end, like doing things you love. Like that's the bottom line, because you have a spouse, you don't have a spouse, you still have to do things you love. That's the thing. It's like do more of the things that bring you joy. Because I think for a lot of us, we've forgotten what brings us joy and we don't do those things. Intentionally do the things that bring you joy, especially as you get older. Like, why not? If not now, when? So
Yeah. But I know we have to go shortly, but I do
oh,
want to mention the book again.
please
Saving
do.
Myself One Step at a
Yes,
Time,
yes,
available at Amazon
yes,
as a paperback and as an audiobook and as an ebook. It's on
yes.
Kindle. And I also have another book. The other
Tell us
book,
about that.
it's Black Girl in Red, White, and Blue America. It's a
Tell us a little
novel.
bit about it. What's that about?
Okay, it's a novel that's based on my life. It's about a girl who grows up poor, works hard, is successful, and then the rug is pulled out from under her.
Mm,
And she's been taught to pursue the American dream. And as she ages, she begins to question whether the pursuit of the American dream should have guided her life to the extent that it did.
oh,
And
wow.
of course, the American dream is one that revolves around materialism in
Mm,
many ways,
true.
around things, and sometimes things at the cost of relationships. So, but again, it's Black Girl in Red, White, and Blue America. It's available on Amazon as well. It's as a paperback and as an ebook, not
Nice. And
as
I'm
an
going to put the links
audiobook.
too. I'm going to get the links. So I'll put the links down so people can actually click on them and go to them
Okay. It's
with the
not an
titles.
audiobook yet because I did my own audiobook when I did Saving Myself and talk, and that almost, I shouldn't say this, but oh my gosh, don't ever stand. You have people tell you to stand up to do audio. Next time I'm going to use a stool or something because I actually suffered a running injury because of standing up so long.
Wow.
So I had to go to physical therapy. Just not a way to go. So people in your audience, if you decide to record a book or record something, don't stand up.
Don't stand, sit. Good advice. Good advice. Oh my word. Thank you, TJ. This was so insightful. It was great to know more about you. And I know a lot of women are going to be inspired by your story. So thank you for sharing your story.
My pleasure.
Thanks. And
Thank
thank you
you.
all for listening. And I look forward to seeing you guys again next week. Bye. Thank you so much for watching an episode of 50 Shades of Over 50. I invite you to join our online community called Flourish, a community created exclusively for women in their 50s, 60s, 70s, and beyond. A place where you'll get to pursue your passion and live your purpose with other like-minded women. If you're not sure what your purpose or passion is, not to worry. I share tools to help you with that. Flourish is the best place to learn, grow, and have fun if you're in your 50s and beyond. Go to www.kwavi.tv/flourish to learn more.